Anyone who played Medarot 2 or the GBA game 2 Core will know this old particular glass cannon very, very well. It is MWB00 Ambiguous, with a kit of missile, rifle, Gatling, biped legs, and the leg ability of Shura, which buffs pace power when a part is broken on the user. Now, honestly, like I mentioned, anyone who played 2 Core will know this guy particularly well, as he basically mirrors the exact same kit as MWB almost to a T, with the exclusion, of course, of leg ability in this case. But one particular issue that Ambiguous had in earlier games was that he was basically considered a glass cannon. In a lot of the older games, he did honestly have no more than maybe 10 HP at the highest, at the cost of having some wickedly high power to trade off for that. Now, he actually has maintained that through the ages, especially with his return back in Medarot 9, and in Medarot S, that does continue to seem to be the case. His basic missile is a gunpowder-based AoE, so it will hit all 4 parts on the target at once, but it is boasting some very impressive power at that base power of 1800, with 6 charges no less. So even if it does hit all parts at once, it is honestly going to be hurting a lot. And to be entirely honest, this does also mean that this arguably makes it the strongest, or one of the strongest, non-heavy missile-based attacks for heads, as this honestly dwarfs even MWB's base power on his damage when using the exact same skill. Basic rifle is a standard shooting attack with pierce damage, so no major drawback or gain or drawback to that one in particular, but a base power of about 1500 is very, very impressive, honestly putting him on the same tier as maybe Warbonnet in this case. Maybe not quite the exact same as Warbonnet, still is just a hair stronger, but that extra power does come in handy, in particular with Ambiguous. The left arm of Gatling is a standard shooting attack as well, as it hits 1 part at regular and 2 parts at random for 1/3 of your total damage. It does also inflict with the no evade, if I recall correctly, so you do have a little bit of a drawback there in this case, but not enough to really cripple Ambiguous if you were to use him regularly, pure set or mixed set. Now, again, as mentioned, he is a little bit of a glass cannon. Not as much but in this case, but he is rather squishy. About 2500 HP for the head, about 2400 per arm, and about 3000 for the legs. So he's not going to be very good at tanking hits to guarantee his overall survival, really. But in the cases where he does absolutely need to tank a hit, it won't necessarily cripple him, as long as you can maybe keep him covered with the defender, or maybe someone with guard boost to help ensure that he gets that extra bolstering to help him tank a few hits. But he does have some very high success ratings as well, which means he's very likely to land a lot of critical hits, or if not the crit, just land the hit in general. That 1564 for his right arm, the 1168 for his left. Relatively decent heat cool too, about the low to mid 500s for his right arm, high 700, mid 600s for his left. Missile, of course, will be the lowest of the bunch as well, so that's kind of par for the course. He does have some pretty solid speed on his legs too, at about 756, so he's in that really nice sweet spot essentially with his overall mobility. Evade at about 875 means he's probably not going to be dodging everything, maybe not grazing a bunch either, so that probably could do with a little bit of bolstering, maybe from upgrade chips. His melee resist at 679 means that he's going to be really hurting against any incoming melee attacks from enemies, so maybe protecting him in that case will be highly recommended. But with that shoot resist of 1285, almost 1300, when it comes to fighting shooters, he can probably hold himself a little more regularly without anyone really needing to support him. As a pure set score, I would rate him about a pretty solid 7 out of 10 across the board. Relatively good armor, or relatively squishy armor, but still in that decent sweet spot, I guess, where if you cover him, he can hold his own pretty well. Very solid base power across the board as well. Relatively good heat and cool across the board in addition. Good sweet spot for his mobility, and an overall, especially with the leg ability of Shura. In the case, this is a rare case where the leg ability does kind of benefit him to a degree. Normally with someone with Shura, it would mean you'd want to make use of it with someone with a sacrifice part, as that would mean the remaining parts that are active would get that damage bonus. But in Ambiguous's case, it kind of works in reverse, where his glass cannon armor actually works to his advantage as long as his legs can stay active in this case. So say, for instance, he loses an arm while in battle, his other arm and his head will get an additional damage bonus for a little more of a punish in this case. So as a pure set score, like I mentioned, about a 7 out of 10 across the board. Mixed parts score, I would rate him very equally. Because all of his parts are very solid, very conventional, there is no major drawback to using any of the three, and you really can't go wrong with using any of them across the build. In the case of his rifle, again, because it does have that very high base power, very close to Warbonnet in this case, who currently holds the record of the highest base power on a conventional rifle part, more along the lines of putting it on the tier of weaker power rifles with 4 modifier. So very solid set, very well balanced all around, just a little squishy in the armor, but with the right allies, you can circumvent that particular drawback relatively easily with no major drawback.